Welcome to the Creation Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth King. Together, we'll have conversations with incredible human beings who have taken their creative outlet and turned it into something innovative. From people leaving the corporate world to be 8-figure entrepreneurs to people who have created books, created a family, or just creating to have fun in the world. We are all in a journey to create something amazing in our lives, and I hope that you find some inspiration of your own here. This is the Creation Innovation Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to Creation Innovation. Today I am going to be talking about my own story. I do not ever really talk about it. Well, I don't think I've ever talked about it fully. Certainly not a solo episode because I have not done a solo episode before. So thank you all for staying tuned and listening to the story. Hopefully it'll give some hope to somebody who's going through it right now. So many of you already know that this whole situation of fertility and women's wellness and all the things really started in 1995, end of December 1994, I think it was actually. My sister, I was 19 at the time, and my sister who was 26, and she was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer, cervical cancer. I say all the time, I didn't even know what a cervix was at that time, but I knew desperately that this is going to be changing the trajectory of my life and how I saw everything really. I was brought up in a Catholic school and remember thinking at that moment after being told that, I went to mass the next day by myself and felt like I had prayed for the first time ever. I had never experienced anything that I needed the only word to say was desperately. I was desperate to have this mercy on my sister, of whoever it was, with this higher being, God, the universe, whatever it was. And at that time, I was already quite spiritual, aside from being brought up in a Catholic school. My parents would always say I was a cafeteria Catholic, in the fact that I took kind of what worked for me and left the rest behind. But really, what I did lay the foundation for was my spiritual journey. So at that time, being the first time I had ever prayed, I would then go on to ask everybody who I came in contact with, and my whole family for that matter, do you pray? Will you pray for my sister? This is what's going on. And at that time, I had just signed up to go to study abroad in Italy. And I would go into every single church around Europe and light the candles for my sister and hope and pray that she would survive this. And the reason that it wasn't your average cervical cancer. And at this time, nobody had ever survived this type of cancer. She's even to this day in the medical journals because it's such a rare form of cancer. As I last knew, still nobody has survived it. So it was a pretty serious diagnosis. Um, Fast forward to the first moment that she said these, or I didn't actually hear it from her. I heard it from a friend actually that night that she had this diagnosis. But when I came home that night and she was there, she had just been married 6 months, mind you, 26 years old. They had said to people that were asking, "Oh, when are you going to have kids?" She would just say, "We're going to have fur babies," because kind of the way to get people to stop asking you when you just get married and everybody's asking you the question over and over. So when I got home, her and her husband were there. I ran right upstairs to my room, and she followed me, and we were both just crying. And I remember her saying, "I didn't really mean it," meaning I didn't really mean that I didn't want to have kids. And I'm going to cry when I talk about this because you it was this idea for her that she was thinking, I didn't mean it about not having kids. So that was really, like, it seemed in that moment that every that she could focus on. Me, I wanted to just make that better for her, right? So the first thought is, well, don't worry, I'll have a baby for you. Again, 19 years old, not even really knowing what that even meant at the time. It was not something that was talked about. And I didn't, I knew what I was saying, of course, and I would do it for her in a heartbeat. Spoiler alert, that didn't happen. And I'll get into that another time. But um, what struck me the most, though, is that that's what she was focusing on. She wasn't focusing on, I might not survive because this is such a rare cancer. It was, I never meant that I didn't want to have kids. And now this is not going to be an option for me. Um, that will always ring so heavy for me because I couldn't really get my head around how do you focus on that? And maybe that was a coping mechanism at the time. How do you focus on that when you have this really crazy cancer diagnosis? Um, but again, perhaps that was her way of focusing and coping with what she could wrap her head around at that time. So, fast forward after that, she's survived, and this has been, gosh, I don't even know, 30 years now this year, which is incredible. And but that was my intro into women's wellness and the urgency of she was going in for a regular birth control refill, and her doctor was like, "No, you need to come in to get your prescription refilled because it's been a while." And then the next thing you know, she needs to have surgery, and this is changing her life. And that surgery was a radical hysterectomy. At that time, they had saved her ovaries with the intent that maybe that would be something that she could use later. And even not knowing anything about anything at that time, I knew that the amount of radiation and chemotherapy that she was getting in her body, I knew, like, of course her ovaries aren't going to survive that. But again, maybe that was something that they did just to appease the situation and give some hope. Maybe I'm not really sure. I would love to go back and have those conversations with people if they really thought with those amounts of medication that would be something that could survive it. They did not survive that treatment. Um, so the fact that this simple pap smear had shown something so severe, that really made me say, when you go to the OB, they generally focus, yes, you do your annuals, but I had always had the experience that unless you were there as a pregnant person in the office getting ready to have a baby, you were kind of just pushed through, yes, let's do your annual exam and move on sort of thing. And this was the first time that I really started to pay attention to everything that was going on. Okay, I need to get a mammogram because that goes and runs in my family. I need to make sure stay on top of this, even though my sister's cancer is, nothing related to genetics. It just made me hypersensitive to that and to everybody around me. Don't put those things off because you never know. And also to the doctors that I worked with and was a patient of, I wanted to make sure that they took my health, regardless of the fact if I was having a baby or not, serious, because we have a lot of parts within us as women that need to be looked after, again, regardless of whether we're intending to have a child or not. So I went on to work in the corporate world and had my own business from a very young age. And a lot of the women that I was working with at the client of mine were older than I. And there was two older women that were going through fertility issues. And I remember them saying they were getting their FSH checked and all these other things, and kind of under their breath saying, you should freeze your eggs, if because I had just started to go through a divorce. I was now at this point 30. So I had just gotten divorced, and I had heard these rumblings through the office for a couple years. So being the type A organized person I was, I thought, okay, that sounds like a good idea. I have my 401k, I have everything in my life on track. Since I just got divorced, let's go do that. So I went back to that fertility doctor that my sister worked with during her situation and said, I'd like to freeze my eggs. He said, you're too young based on the technology at that time, and you need to come back later. Hopefully you'll find somebody. And I was 36, still single, and went back again. And he said, okay, the freezing process has now changed. I think let's go forward with this at this point. So at that point, I froze 11 eggs at age 36 and kind of felt like a little bit of a false sense of what's the word? More than an insurance policy, I guess. Because even though I think he mentioned there was no guarantee, they by no means walked through the process of what would happen if I needed to use them again and the chances of being able to just the attrition rates and all of that. That was not said. It was all about how many follicles you have, what are we able to retrieve, what are able to freeze properly, and then you went on your way. Here's your monthly or annual storage fees, and see you hopefully later. Like maybe you'll meet somebody and you'll never need to use these. So that was 36. At 39, I went back to my OB for my annual. I had had my periods change. They were definitely heavier, um, more pain even, and I had never experienced that. I had always had very regular periods. I had been not on the birth control pill. I was always very cautious of what I was doing with my reproductive health because of my sister. So I knew my cycle really well at that point. This was long before it was trendy, so to speak, to have to know about your reproductive system and your body to the extent that I did. Again, I have to thank the situation in our family for that. But I just knew something was wrong. My OB did an ultrasound and said, yeah, you do have some fibroids, but they're small. No need to worry, and sent me on my way. At that point, I thought something just doesn't sit well with me with this situation. And I asked to see the fertility doctor again. Not asked, I made an appointment to see the fertility doctor. And I said, this is what's going on. Can you please do an ultrasound and just let me know if you agree with the ultrasound that my OBGYN said here? And he said, yes, they're small, but they're in the lining of the uterus. And so, therefore, any sort of embryo would have very few areas to attach. And he recommended me to see a gynecological oncologist because, again, at this time, which is now 8 years ago, I think, um, 8 or 9 years ago, he wanted to make sure because of my age, I was, like I said, 39 and a half, that I wasn't getting any scar tissue and that the doctor that was doing this really knew what they were doing and again was hypersensitive to the fact that I wanted to be using my uterus very quickly because I was um, close to turning 40. So I went through the myomectomy. I had the fibroids removed. And then at this point now I'm 40. I had since met my current husband, and the doctor had said, you need to start trying as soon as you're healed. So I waited for that period of time. My first cycle that my uterus was healed and I got the green light, we tried and I got pregnant with Holden, my first son. I was in a hotel room. I've said this story before. I was in a hotel room in Atlanta for work and had pregnancy tests with me, knowing that I was going to be hitting that date of testing while I was there, and got 3 positive pregnancy tests, of course, because I would never take just one, and called Dave at that time, and I couldn't reach him, and I was so frustrated because I wanted to talk to him so badly, and finally I texted him a picture of these 3 positive pregnancy tests, and I went into the room. I obviously was in the bathroom, went into the room and got on my knees and just thank God. I really thought, what a miracle that on our first round of trying naturally after my surgery that we got pregnant. I was so grateful, still am so grateful. And that was kind of the start of, again, this experience with fertility because I had just come off the surgery. My fertility doctor had agreed to monitor my pregnancy right after right after the surgery. So I was basically treated like a regular fertility client or patient, I should say. So I went every week. I did all the blood work every other day, took the progesterone suppositories, um, and was monitored like somebody who had gone through a round of IVF. And at that point, I didn't really know any different in the fact that this pregnant like we would just go every week and it was amazing and it was fun and we got to see, our little one on the screen. And at that time, fertility doctors were seeing you up until 12 weeks. That was pretty standard. So for the first 12 weeks, I got to see my baby every week. And that was such an amazing thing. There was never any doubt that it would go any other direction other than walking out of there with a big smile on our face and the ultrasound pictures. Um, so that was pretty fun. And then once we got transferred to our or graduated from there to our regular OB, of course it felt like not as big of a deal because I felt everything was healthy. I was good. I've generally felt pretty good. And as much as I was going to miss our fertility clinic because I loved them all so much and the doctor, it was just kind of the next step. So that whole experience was definitely different than what was going to be coming down after that. Um, but even through the pregnancy, I'll just touch on that really quickly too, because again, being 40 years old, I didn't really think anything of that at the time, mainly because I didn't feel that I was that age, for starters, I guess. And for two, I think everything had gone so well. So I never expected to think anything about the fact that I was 40. I will remember the first time the doctor that we saw as my OB who was going to deliver, Holden, had said to me, not to worry that the hospital that you're delivering at, no, he didn't say delivering at. The hospital, Hoag, is where I had my son. Hoag deals with a lot of geriatrics, so you'll be fine there and well taken care of. And I was like, he can't really be talking about me because he said geriatrics. That was the first time that I'd heard that word being used with people over 35. And quickly I recognized, oh my gosh, he is talking about me, which was interesting. I had a lot of During that first pregnancy, I had a lot of the random side effects of pregnancy. I always say nothing major in the fact that people go through months and months of bed rest and all kinds of stuff that is much more difficult than I ever did. But, I was pretty nauseous and sick for most of the pregnancy. I had carpal tunnel pretty much out of the gate. I had eye issues. I mean, I literally kept a list because it was getting to the point where I was so shocked by all these side effects from pregnancy or symptoms of pregnancy, I guess I should say. And just couldn't believe that these random things were correlated to pregnancy. The gingivitis with your gums bleeding and everything, And every time I would go to a dermatologist or the dentist or my OB, they would always say, "Oh yeah, that's pregnancy and that's your hormones and, not to worry, etc." So that was interesting. And then getting to the point of delivery, I knew because I had just come off of the myomectomy, the surgery for the fibroids, that I would have to be induced as a C-section at 39 weeks. because they didn't want to put the uterus in a compromised position for what they called said to me was rupturing. Um, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, the idea of this rupturing, or I think somebody, the nurse even used the word like exploding or something. I could not get my head around what that would even be like. Is that even a thing? But anyway, needless to say, I followed the the rules and what they're talking about, and went with that planned C-section, and also had the monitoring from the maternal fetal medicine doctor prior to that because of the prior surgery and everything, which again, I always say in my case was a blessing because I got to see my little guy every week, actually multiple times a week, 3 times a week. I'd have to go and be monitored before delivery for, I want to say, almost 2 months prior to delivery, where it was that regular of 3 times a week. And again, I was happy to do it because I was in this naive place of thinking that everything was great and this is just how it goes. And I was just so excited. And thinking about it, it really does make me happy, but it makes me laugh of how ignorant I was of everything else at that time. As educated I was around fertility, I was still so naive and ignorant around pregnancy itself and all of that. And went on to have my C-section. And again, all things being equal, it went well, but I didn't react well to the medication and felt extraordinary pain. And we had tried post surgery everything under the sun to get my pain to subside, and it wasn't working, and it was just so awful. And I remember saying to the doctor in the hospital, everyone that I knew who had had a C-section always said that it was awesome and you got to have it scheduled, and the recovery was so easy. And he said they lied. It's not easy. You're getting 7 layers of abdominal wall cut into and whatever. And my body just was not reacting to any sort of combination of the pain medication. And on top of that, when Holden came out, he was a little bit blue at first, and I was, of course, not even really recognizing, because I had, if any of you have been through a type of surgery where you don't react well to the medication or the anesthesia, sometimes it can cause you to shake, where you literally are like, feel like you're having convulsions. You're not necessarily flopping around like a fish, but you are shaking badly. So I was just, my lips and my teeth were chattering. I was just trying to focus to try to get that to calm down. I wasn't really even sure what was going on. Um, and then Dave and the nurse had brought the baby over, and the nurse had said to Dave, let's just try to put the baby on her and see if he starts to get pink again. And sure enough, they put him on me, and this was while I was in recovery. So I was already out of the operating room. And as they had him on me, he started to change his color, well, that he did. I wasn't, again, being able to pay attention to this because I was so focused on being in so much pain and shaking uncontrollably and just whatever, which is sad looking back on it, because those are such special moments, I think, with moms bonding with their babies. And when you go through a surgery like that, to whatever degree, if your body is having any sort of reaction, you kind of miss those moments of those first initial, like, oh my goodness, this is my little beautiful angel. And luckily we have pictures and video and all of that sort of stuff. But when I think back on it myself, all I really remember is what I'm sharing with you is trying to get through it from my perspective of my body. I kind of even remember thinking like, I got to just, you like, to Dave, you take care of him right now because I'm not capable, because I was shaking so bad. I didn't know, I couldn't hold him, the baby. Um, but they were holding him on me to make sure that his blood was able to kind of circulate and get to where he needed to be. So anyway, then through that experience of recovering, I finally got to a point where I was able to stop shaking and got put into a regular room. Still, even the 4 days that I was there post surgery, I wasn't able to get the pain fully under control to a point where I just said, "You know what? I'm just gonna do Tylenol and Advil because all these other ones are just not scratching the surface. So why am I putting any of the stronger pain meds in my body if it's not working at all?" So we went to Tylenol and Advil, and that was that. The other thing that kind of caught me off guard while we were there in the hospital was being able to breastfeed, or in my case, not being able to breastfeed. I felt like the colostrum came through and everything again seemed normal. But what I wasn't realizing is that the milk wasn't coming in for the baby. So even though I was doing the times that they said and all of the things, Holden wasn't getting what he needed. So it felt like there was milk coming out. The baby was there and doing it, but he just wasn't getting it. So that kind of led to having some issues when we got home after 4 days and took him for his first initial pediatric appointment the day after, where they realized that he had jaundice. And part of that, they said, is because he wasn't eating well, because I didn't know that he wasn't getting fed, which is such a bummer because I think, I, of course, learned from then for my next babies that I'm just going to always supplement for them in the event that I wasn't able to give them what they needed. And in fact, I wasn't. And after I learned that with Holden, I started pumping because was just trying to get the milk to be able to make more milk, and that just never happened. And I did supplement with him for 3 months, thinking that at least I'm giving him something better than nothing. But in the end, he probably really got close to not much at all from me, unfortunately. So he had severe jaundice. We had to take him to. I got a call from the pediatrician saying you need to go to the children's hospital emergency room. We're letting you know that we're letting the hospital know that you are on your way. And I freaked out. I, of course, again, was in so much pain, could barely walk. And now we're being told that we need to bring our newborn baby to the emergency room, not only the regular one, but the children's hospital. Um, so there we went, and I don't even, I think we spent like 5 days there, and my body, talk about the cortisol and the stress levels and my nervous system just being completely shut down. I think had I not been making the milk prior to that, that for sure would have stopped that, because he was, of course, in the lights and all of that sort of stuff, which is fine. I think it just really scared me, not really knowing what that all meant. Nobody could really give me a direct answer of the doctors of what the jaundice was, how it happened, what number we were trying to get to, because I just wanted to know, like, where are we trying to reach? Like, and it was just, I felt like we were getting the runaround there and whatever. Anyway, that's my story for walking into this situation with baby number one and prior to that, and how we kind of got into this. All to say also, I guess I should have mentioned before that since 2008, I had also done my ICF coaching certification. So being a life coach is only regulated by one board, the International Coaching Federation. So there's a lot of coaches that are not certified by ICF. There's a lot of certifications out there, and you can do all of those certifications, but I wanted one that was actually recognized by a board and that you had to do certain hours in order to certify, and there was a lot that went behind that. So throughout all these years and alongside my other business, I had always been a life coach as well. Um, so that was just an interesting thing to note because when I was going through these things and feeling stressed and bringing Holden back to the hospital and things, that ability to know what to do to regulate myself also was skewed because of hormones and everything else. So I just want to mention that because as much as we know logically about things and how to regulate ourselves and what to do and what you've seen before, sometimes when you're going through it yourself, and when there's also hormones and biological things physically happening to your body, it throws you for a deeper loop than you would expect. And I think that's the situation that I was in there. And thank God I have an amazing husband because he really helped so much with the baby and really taking charge of all the medical things with him, with Holden, even though I was there. But when they were poking him and prodding him, it was just not something that I could physically watch. So a lot of times I had to go out of the room or close my eyes or mainly go out of the room because not only did I not want to see it, just hearing him be upset, my son, I would fall apart in those first few days because I was just out reeling, really. So, anyway, thank you for listening to this story. I feel like it's part one, essentially, because it goes on to how I got into fertility coaching specifically and all the things that come next. But I did want to talk about my full story and through the pregnancy and the birth and all of those fun things, just to share and have you all get to know a little bit more about me. So let me know if you have any questions about that, if you want to know more of a certain aspect of those things that I just spoke about. But thanks again for listening, and I can't wait to hear from you soon. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Creation Innovation Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify for free episodes and subscribe to the Creation Innovation Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you choose to get your podcast. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening for a chance to receive a special gift. Yes, we actually do send out gifts. It's my favorite thing to do. So visit us at elizabethking.com/creation innovation for more information on how to enter. Every review counts, and we are so grateful. You can follow me at the official Elizabeth King on Instagram or TikTok. Until next time.